Suit up, strap in, warm the tires, and leave on yellow. Time for the MitsuTimes podcast. Presented by MitsuTimes.org, the home of the fastest Mitsubishi cars. With your host, Josh.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's Josh from MitsuTimes. Today my guest is Tony Niemczyk. He is the owner and driver of a couple cars on our list, most notably the 2G Drag and Drive that you've probably seen make a big splash on the internet here a few weeks ago. How you doing today, Tony?
Hey Josh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's so good to have you on. I know you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, I've been in DSMs for, I think, over 20 years now.
So what was it 20 years ago that got you into them?
It's kind of a funny story. I actually bought a 2G non-turbo in, I think, 2001, just as a commuter car in college. And then when I was there, I met a guy by the name of Paul Johnson, who has unfortunately since passed away, but he had a 2G GSX, a 97, and it was pretty heavily modified at the time, and he took me for a ride in it because we met just because we had the same car. He took me for a ride in it, and I fell in love. So a few months later, I put my 2G up for sale, my non-turbo for sale, and bought a GSX, and that's the green GSX I have now.
Oh, wow. So it's definitely, you've definitely got your money's worth over all the years.
Yeah, I mean, back then the cars were still pretty new. I guess it was like 6 or 7 years old when I bought it, and it was a lot more. Actually, I guess they're probably coming back to those prices now, but
yeah.
You know, we went through quite a few years where they were pretty inexpensive.
For sure. Yeah, seems like there was a while where you could pick one up running and driving for $1,500, and now you can't even get a shell for $1,500.
Yep. Yeah, especially a clean one with no rust.
Right. So tell me about the early days back after you got that GSX. How was your DSM life then?
So it was a lot of fun, and it's probably the way a lot of the DSMers are with them now too. You know, I daily drove the car to class every day, to work, whatever I had to do, and I just continuously modified it. Me and Paul kind of had a rivalry going throughout the college days. By the time I graduated, it was like a high 11-second car that I drove all the time. I went to South Carolina to school, back up to Pennsylvania where I lived at the time. So, I mean, I would put 700-800 miles on it one way to school, and then drive it down to Atlanta Dragway and run like 1170s or something with it.
Wow.
And then when I graduated college, I got a little bit more heavily modifying the car, and I bought a daily driver so I didn't have to rely on it. And I ran Nopi and the NHRA Sport Compact Series for like 3 or 4 years after I graduated. Pretty heavily. I tried to run all the stuff on like the East Coast for both of those series. And the car at the time was, you know, mid 10-second car. It made 1 9-second pass back then, and I think in like 2006 or 2007. But most of the time it was like a mid 10-second car that I would just take out and race and break all the time. It was a stick shift car back then too. It was a stick shift up until recently.
Wow. I feel like a lot of DSMers, they push the manual as far as they can and get so tired of breaking stuff that it's like the auto comes inevitably.
Yeah, for me it was I had this idea to try to do this drag and drive thing. It's kind of a dream I've had for many years. And the stick shift, I had a dog box in the car. I had, you know, the full DSS drive line, everything. But it was very rare that you would go to the track and drive the car back on the trailer. So there was pretty much no way that I could see to do a drag and drive event with the car as a stick shift.
Yeah.
The auto was really the only solution. And when I first did the auto swap in the car, I kept the dog box and all the manual stuff. And my plan was, as soon as I finished what I wanted to do with the drag and drive stuff, I was putting the dog box back in it.
Oh, okay.
But I've actually since sold all that stuff because I fell in love with the auto.
I'm sure we'll get to it later, but it seems like you've definitely, I guess with the help of Aaron, you've perfected the auto, just making it work so smoothly and be able to race and be able to drive every day.
Yeah, it's I never thought these cars could do what I've been able to do with this thing now. But yeah, we'll get into more of that later.
So Tony, you know, the 2G is incredible. There's no doubt about it. But I want to first talk about your 4G 6.3 dragster because It's been on the top 5 of the MitsuTimes list ever since the list has been started, and even before then on DSM Times with its mid 6-second pass. So I want to talk about what it was that motivated you to build that car in the first place.
Yes, that's another pretty cool story. The car, my dad actually purchased the car and had it built. And we did all of, like, after the chassis was built, he and I did everything together with the car, and he drove it the first couple of years and all too. So technically it's his car, I guess you would say. But when I was racing with the Nopi series, my dad really loved that environment and the people that were there and the people that ran it. It was such a great series. It was a lot of fun, and he wanted to come out and race with me.
Wow.
So we started like pricing out what it would cost to build him like a front wheel drive 4G63 car.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something like Joe Bucci's building now, probably not quite as extreme. And it was getting to be pretty expensive. And at the same time, I took my car to Ken's Custom Chassis in like right near Maple Grove Raceway in Pennsylvania to get the roll cage put in. And I got to his shop, and, we're talking about everything I needed to be done with my car. And Ken's at the time was like 70 something years old, and talking through all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, this guy's probably never worked in an import, whatever, but it's like a roll cage, right? How hard can it be?
Right.
So he's going through all this stuff. We get done with my car, and he goes, hey, I want you to check this out. And he pulls me over to the side, and he's got a dragster on a jig at his shop. He's like, you recognize that motor? And it was a 4G63 in a dragster. And that was his personal car that he was building. And it was, as far as I know, the first ever 4G63 in a dragster.
Holy cow.
So I called my dad, and I'm like, Dad, you got to come up with me when I come to pick up the car. You got to check this out. So he comes up and checks it out with me when I was picking up my car. We were ecstatic with the work Ken did on my car. We're looking over the chassis there, and he's like, I'll build you guys one if you want. And my dad was like, you know what? This is the way to go. Let's do this. So instead of building a front-wheel drive car, he decided, let's build this dragster together.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool. It's totally dumb luck. I mean, like, I just happened to go to Ken because a friend of my dad recommended him after I had some other issues with the cage and stuff. And, it just worked out perfect that he happened to be building that car at the time.
That's awesome.
We had no idea.
I mean, what a chance, but also I'm so glad that it happened because that thing has just been phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad it happened too. I never would have thought that, that chance encounter would have happened, but that's how sometimes the best things in life happen. But
for sure.
I'm ecstatic to have had the opportunity to build this car and drive it and everything.
So
all the time I get to spend with my dad.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's memories that you can never take away right there.
Yep.
So what's it like to drive this thing, doing a mid 6-second pass with a 2-liter behind you?
It's pretty crazy. It's probably the spool up process and all is probably way harder than almost any other car out there. Because in the classes we've been running the car, we're not allowed to use nitrous. So it's a whole process to get, upwards of an 80 millimeter turbo spooled up with a 2-liter 4-cylinder.
Yeah.
And that's where most of the time and like complication of driving the car is that spool up process. But then, once you're staged and you have your finger on that trans brake button, you let go of the trans brake button. And like the first couple times I let go of that button and the car left, it pulls over 4 Gs off the starting line.
Jeez.
You would get, 20, 30, 40 feet down the track before you like realize where you are, which is bad to say. Like you don't, but yeah. So like, not that you black out. Like I'm sure I was in control of the car, but like it happened so quick. You're like, oh my God, how did I just get here?
Yeah.
And then, as you get more passes in the car, that starts to calm down and everything starts to slow down, and you just drive it like it's second nature. And like, I mean, every time I make a pass in the car, still, like, when I'm going through the traps of over 200 miles an hour, like, I'm in the car fist bumping sometimes if it's a good pass because it just feels so awesome. Like, pulling over a G at 200 miles an hour still.
Yeah.
It's a pretty incredible feeling.
About as close as some people will get to a fighter jet right there.
Yeah.
So, Tony, what's the best that you've gone in this dragster?
So we went, this is a couple years ago now, I think in 2018, we went a 647 at 208 and then the next run I think was a 648 at 210. We changed rear gears between them, which got the mile an hour up, but lost some 60 foot. So our best is 647. Our best mile an hour is 210. Best 60 foot is 970, which is something that a lot of people probably can't comprehend what that feels like.
Right.
But yeah, it's an awesome feeling. Yeah. I'm really proud of what we've been able to do with that car.
I was going to say, I wanted to point out the sub 1 second 60 foot there, because that's incredible.
Yeah. I think there's more in the car there too. It's just always been a battle, like trying to get everything together on one run.
Right.
We do have a ton of runs in the car, but I don't see why on a good track that car can't go like 950 to the 60 foot.
Wow. So we haven't seen this car in a few years, Tony. What's the future hold for it?
Yeah, so we kind of took a step back from the car for a little bit. I went through some stuff in my life, and we took a break from it. But we rent that 647 on an iron block, a stock block, stock crank. And then shortly after that, we split the block in half. So we were definitely at the limits of what the stock block can handle.
For sure,
so,
yeah.
I ended up, I bought 2 billet blocks for it. We have gone out a handful of times with the billet blocks, but haven't made all that decent of passes. We got it in the 6s for 1 pass. But we haven't had a lot of time to mess with it in these last couple of years, and we're having some trouble with, I'm sure everybody's aware, Jimmy Bowling and stuff like that with the motors. But we've got all that stuff sorted out now. So now it's just a matter of putting it back together and getting it back out to the track. And we changed up some stuff in the transmission. We've been talking about changing it up even more to try to get it to be a little bit more efficient. Like I said, spooling up with no nitrous and 80 millimeter turbo. We've got a really loose converter in the car. So we're trying to see what we can do to make that more efficient and just see how far we can push the platform.
For sure.
My goals are very lofty for the car. Like, I'm not talking about a tenth or two off the time. I'd like to go, in the ballpark of half a second quicker, but I'm not sure how feasible that is.
Well, that was going to be my next question, Tony, is what, in your opinion, what's the feasibility of this thing taking the number 1 spot and beating that 6.2?
I think that's pretty doable with the car. I don't know. The thing I struggle with is, will we get there with a power glide?
Gotcha.
That's the 2-speed automatic that's in the car. And the reality is, I think if we can't get there with the 2-speed auto or get close this year, I might be seriously considering putting a clutch in the car. Just because I think at the power level that car is at, and we're abusing the motor too hard to spool it up and everything on the starting line. And I think if we put a clutch in the car and multiple gears, something like Nick and Carl Burnett raced that Ecotec 4-cylinder car been 590s. They just put a 10-speed Liberty in that car. So I don't think I need a 10-speed, but something with more gears, keep the RPMs where we want them, but also be able to lock it up through the traps. I think that's what the car really needs. But I'm going to try to see how far we can push the power glide, and then if we don't, I want that number 1 spot. So if we can't get there with the power glide, I'm going to have to make a big investment into a clutch probably.
I'd love to hear that. So, Tony, is there any events this year that we could look forward to seeing the dragster in action maybe?
So we decided to kind of take a step back from events with the car for right now and just work on sorting it out at Test and Tunes. I'm really fortunate to live like 20 minutes from ACO, and they've been doing these $200 Friday private test sessions where there's like 20 or 30 cars. So I suspect we'll be out of a decent number of those this year, testing. If we make some good passes, I'll post about it and stuff. But no events planned at the moment. Maybe when we get the car where we want it to be, we'll take it out to some events. But yeah, that's about it for the car right now.
Okay. So Tony, let's go back to the Drag and Drive 2G, because I want to talk more about that car, because I think it's not just very exciting that you're doing so well, but I think it's exciting that the DSM platform's you're kind of helping it have like a second coming of, well, maybe instead of doing this, we could do this. So I want to talk about these Drag and Drive events that you've done so well at with your 2G.
Sure. Yeah, what do you want to know? You want to know how the events run?
Yeah, let's talk about how they run and maybe what I can do to get my DSM into one of these events.
So the events, anybody can enter the events. They the big ones like Drag Week and Sick Week sell out in a couple minutes tops. So it's really just a matter of being ready to register. But I mean, you can go to these events with a 20-second car if you want. There's no rules on how fast the car needs to be. But obviously, I've been going trying to win quickest four-cylinder. Right. So the events are. I think there's like 20 something of them now across the country. So again, you can find one local probably almost anywhere in the country that you live and go do one. And the rules vary, but I'll speak mostly to Sick Week and Drag Week, which are arguably the two biggest right now. Yeah. I think like Rocky Mountain Race Week and a couple others are probably close in size though. So the genesis of it is you race your car at the first track. And then you have to drive your race car to the next track on a prescribed route, stopping at checkpoints along the way and taking pictures of your car at those checkpoints, and then race it the next day at the next racetrack. And you have to do that for 5 consecutive days. You end up at the same racetrack you started at on the 5th day. So you basically do a big loop. And they range in mileage from, I think Sick Week this year was around 800 miles. Drag Week, when I did that, I think I did it in 2021. It was like almost 1,300 miles total that I put in the car. So that's a lot of driving, and you're only allowed. You can't have a car follow you. You can't have a support vehicle. You can't go to your truck and trailer that are at the first track the entire event. If you go to them at all during the event, you're disqualified from the event.
Wow.
Like I said, you can't have a car follow you. You can't have a truck and trailer follow you. You can't have an RV follow you. You are just out there on your own with your race car, the person or people you bring with you, and the stuff that you bring with you. So I tow a 4x6 foot trailer behind my car, which is pretty crazy, I guess, to see a DSM towing a trailer. And I stuff that with every single, maybe not every single, but every spare part that I can possibly conceive replacing during the week. I put a cylinder head in there. I have a spare transmission case, every internal part to a transmission, a spare transfer case. In the past, I've brought a spare rear. I didn't bring one this past year. Alternator, starter, you name it. I put it in there. Couplers, anything I can think of. And then you got to bring all the tools and your slicks and all that stuff as well. I haven't weighed the trailer, but I suspect the trailer's in the ballpark at 2,000 pounds when it's fully loaded down with all my stuff. So not only is it brutal that you're racing the car and then driving it upwards of 300 miles per day, you're also towing a trailer that weighs almost as much as the car itself. Right. It's definitely, like, I know a lot of people say they have street cars. I don't see my car, and I don't want to sound cocky about this, but I don't see my car on the same level as those street cars. Like, most of those cars wouldn't survive 300 miles on the highway towing a trailer without overheating in Florida heat, or sitting in stop and go traffic. Like, they purposely take you in places that are challenging to drive on these events. Like, we were in traffic coming off of the A1A. You have to say Beachfront Avenue after you say that, I guess. We were in traffic for like 45 straight minutes. We moved like 2 miles on Sick Week this year. And it's like 90 degrees out. Jeez. Like towing a trailer, stop and go traffic. A lot of stock DSMs probably can't handle that, you know?
For sure, yeah.
And you gotta be able to keep your oil temps cool, your transmission temps cool, your engine temps cool. So it's really challenging. The street drive is like the great equalizer at those events.
It's not for the faint of heart, for sure.
Definitely not. And then there's the craziest part for me is in the middle of the week on Wednesday, you're always as far as you're ever going to be from your trailer because you like I said, you kind of do a loop. So like on Drag Week, the first time I did it, on Wednesday, we were over 600 miles from our truck and trailer.
Jeez.
And when you're pulling into that track and you've got nothing but your race car, and you think about the fact that the Drag Week that I did was kind of in the Midwest. I think we were in like Byron, Illinois or something like that on Wednesday, or that might have been Thursday. I don't remember exactly where we were Wednesday, but we're like, I don't know, 1,500 miles from my house, 600 miles from my truck and trailer.
Jeez.
And, if you break, what are you doing? You're gonna have to go find a rental car to drive to your truck and trailer, and then drive your truck and trailer back to your race car to pick it up.
Right.
And it's this whole thing, and that extra level of stress, I feel like is actually what makes it really exciting for me.
Oh, okay.
Knowing how much you have to count on that car.
Yeah.
So you gotta basically do anything you can to fix it and keep going.
Keep it alive. Yeah, that's almost has like a Mad Max feel to it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's cars that come in the last day really cobbled together. They can't realistically make a decent run, but they made it to the finish line. That's the key.
It's definitely what do they say? It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're not on the street drives. We're definitely not beating on the car or anything. Barely take it over 3,000 RPMs and barely, never getting a boost. Maybe see 1 to 2 psi just because it's a 2-liter 4-cylinder and it struggles to tow that trailer. But you take it super easy on the street because that's literally just survive to make it to the next track.
Yeah.
The car could handle more, but I don't want to risk it. I've got 5 days of that.
So Tony, I've seen, with your success, I've seen so many people say, "Hey, I'm gonna stop doing drag racing, the kind of style that is traditional, and start building my car towards this." So, what advice would you give someone who's thinking about doing this?
Overbuild everything, because there's a lot of drag racers whose philosophy is I've seen people DSS rear axles are, I don't know, $2,000. You know how many stock axles I can put in the car for that? But on these drag and drive events, that can't be the mentality, right? You can't be swapping your axles every day to make it through the event. So my car's drive line is almost identical to Aaron Gregory's drive line that went 709 at 199. I don't have the 7% taller gears, but I've got all the stuff in the transmission he has. I have the same rear axles he has, the same rear differential. I have an aluminum drive shaft. He has a carbon one. They're pretty similar. I actually have better front axles than he has in my car from my stick shift days. I have almost the same transfer case. So do I need that for an 870 car? No, probably not. But do I trust lesser stuff to make it through a week without worrying about it?
Right.
And the answer is no, I don't. So in that regard, I've heard comments online of oh, for the amount of money he has in that car, it better go that fast. It's not about the money. It's about making sure that I can make it through the week with the car. There's a big difference. The car is capable of much faster. I've never pushed the car as hard as it can go because I've always done these events where it's got to survive the whole week.
Yeah.
So I say it's capable of much faster. I haven't done it, so it technically isn't capable yet, but it's built to go faster than it does go.
Right. But when pushing it onto the trailer isn't an option, I mean, you can only do so much. Right.
And it's the biggest thing that we held back from this year, I say me and Aaron Gregory, he was my co-pilot, is it's a wet block so that it can survive driving on the street without overheating.
Makes sense.
A full wet block. There's no fill at all. So neither of us are too comfortable with how much harder can we push it. The power level and the boost level we're running right now, it's survived. The motor's the same motor. It's been in the car for the last 3 drag and drive events. So we know what boost level and timing and all we can put in it, and it seems to be pretty happy there. So that's all we did that same thing this year to run 870s. And we had to show a lot of restraint to not turn the boost up higher because we just aren't sure how much more the wet block can handle.
Yeah. Tony, I have a quick question for you that's kind of related, I guess. I at the tracks, when people get there to race, is there as many breakdowns and oil downs as we see normally at a drag race, or do people generally have just better built cars that don't break down as much?
So I would argue people have worse built cars at these events. I'm guilty of this as well. The first time I tried to do one, everybody signs up for these events with a car that's not ready yet.
Gotcha.
And then they thrash in the last minute. And David Freiberger famously says at the start of every drag week, "This is the largest collection of cars that didn't run last week." So usually what happens is day 0, which is tech day, you can make test runs. And then day 1 is day 1 at the first track. Like, that's the first day that actually counts.
Yeah.
You see a decent amount of attrition and oil downs and stuff on day 0 and day 1. Cars that never leave that first track. And then drag week historically after that, like the attrition at the track is pretty low. You don't see a lot of oil downs or anything. Sick week is a little bit of a different animal because Tom Bailey's trying to build that to be the fastest event out there.
Okay.
So everybody is pushing their stuff really hard. And we saw oil downs every single day. We saw exploded transmissions every single day. We saw crashes on 2 of the days, unfortunately. But yeah, Sick week was definitely a lot more oil downs than what drag week historically has had.
Okay. That's interesting.
Compared to like the DSM shootout, I would say it's probably a little bit less oil downs. Like DSMs are pretty notorious for oiling down the track.
Right. Well, yeah, when you said the biggest collection of cars that didn't run last week, that my first thought was the shootout.
Yeah, David Freiberger has probably never been to the DSM shootout. He might change his thoughts there after seeing that event.
Some of them don't even run until they get to the track.
Yep. Yeah, and that happens a lot at drag week and sick week as well.
So, Tony, what's the setup on your car that's made it so successful at these events?
All right, there's a lot to that, and actually there's 2 setups I'll talk about on the car. So for drag week 21 and then sick week 22, the car was basically exactly the way I dreamed the car could be, from all the way back in those college days when I didn't have the money to do it the way I wanted to do. And basically it's an aluminum rod 2-liter, stock crank, GRP rods, Manley pistons, a 1G head with a DVDT fab intake manifold, which is now MCR, Machine Concept Racing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've had the intake for so long. It was before he rebranded to MCR. And then I have a drive-by-wire throttle body on it, a 72 millimeter turbo, a 5-inch ETS intercooler core. I had, again, I'm going to talk about this older setup first. I had 650cc primary fuel injector clinic injectors, and then I had 2150 secondary fuel injector clinic injectors, and then a Haltech controlling all of it. I guess I should talk about the driveline real quick. I mentioned that I have DSS axles, DSS drive shaft. The car had a stock 2G rear differential in it with my own billet cover that I had made for it all the way back in 2005 or 2006.
Dang.
What else? It's the automatic has all of the billet baskets and stuff. Aaron Gregory built that automatic, so it's got a lot of his tricks and things in it as well. And then a precision torque converter. So then the Haltech controls everything. And the part that I thought was the coolest on that car, or the car the way that it was then, is I had the stock fuel tank feeding those 650 injectors with its own independent fuel system, like a fuel pump in the tank, regulator, lines, all that stuff was completely independent of a secondary fuel system.
Wow.
That factory fuel system ran on 93 octane pump gas. And then I have a small fuel cell in the car that I put straight E98 in.
Huh.
And I had a secondary, I had 2 Bosch 044s, and then that fed the 2150s and their own regulator, their own lines, all that stuff. And when the car would get to 2 or 3 PSI of boost, the Haltech would turn on the secondary fuel pumps. And then when we get to 7 or 8 PSI, it would start phasing in the secondary injectors. So basically what I was doing is I had the injectors set up such that when I was under boost, I was making my own E85 in the intake manifold.
That's awesome.
With the injectors phasing in. So on that setup, I would roll into the track, not even change the tune-up. From just having done a 300-mile street drive, I've literally changed the tires and the spark plugs. I don't even know that I needed to change the spark plugs. I just it seemed like a good thing to do is put a race set of plugs in it, not the ones that just drove 300 miles on. And I'd put the parachute on the back, and I would go run the car.
Wow.
And the car went 879 that way with that dual fuel system, stock tank, all that stuff, and a full exhaust out the back bumper.
That's so cool.
That looked stock. So that was like my dream for the car. Like this ultimate street car, doesn't take anything to change over for the racetrack, you know, and that's the way I've always dreamed the car could be. I even drove it to our local track, ran an 8 and drove it home that night. So like that was another milestone I wanted to hit with the car. Again, with that dual fuel system, everything.
Wow.
So that netted me sick week 2022. My average time for the week was 9:22 because on sick week I didn't push the car as hard as I did to run that 8 after sick week. But then Aaron and I were talking about if we were going to do sick week again 2023, and we're like, yeah, let's do it, but we can't just go and do the same thing again. So we decided it's time to pull some weight out of the car because that extra tank running with like 16 gallons of fuel in it and all that stuff is super heavy. We didn't know how much a 4-inch exhaust all the way out the back was hurting the car. So we decided to ditch that. And a bunch of other things I did to take some weight out of the car. So for this past year, I switched the car over to straight E85 on just one fuel cell. So both rails are now connected. I've got one big pump that runs both of them. I have a smaller pump for the street drive. And then I took the exhaust off. I put a hood exit exhaust on it, which I absolutely hate.
Yeah.
But it's what I felt I needed to do to reach my goal with the car. And I found a couple other areas to take some weight out. And I also put a Magnus transfer case in it this year that Aaron and Booston put together for me.
Heck yeah.
A Volk rear subframe with a 3000 GT rear.
Nice.
I put in it this year too. Because I had broken a rear diff in the car a year or two ago, so I didn't want to risk doing that again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I made all those changes to the car, and then at sick week this year, we showed up with none of that stuff I just talked about tested, other than like a quick couple minute drive around my area. But I'm in New Jersey in the middle of winter, sick weeks in February, so like I realistically can't get on the car much here,
right?
In that weather. So day one, we decided to make a hit. We turned the boost down and on. It went at 890 something on testing day, and we're like, okay, that's good enough. You know, we'll pack it up and we'll be ready for Monday. Monday, we thought we turned it up a decent amount, and it went at almost identical time. So before that run, Aaron and I talked like, what's our target time where we'll be happy enough to leave? And we both agreed a mid 890 would be fast enough that we will pack up and leave. So I make that run, and it goes 895 with a 2.
Oh, wow.
When we get back, we're like, that's a mid 890. But neither of us were too excited about it. I could see it on his face. I wasn't excited about it. We're like, let's go make another run. So we turned it up a little bit and went back up in the staging lanes and went 879. We're like, all right, that was definitely worth it. And then got on the road and sat in traffic all day. But yeah, that was, again, like kind of untested. Like I didn't change the motor, I didn't change the transmission, but like took a bunch of weight out of it, changed the fuel, changed the injectors, changed the fuel pump, changed the rear differential, changed the drive shaft. Like a lot of stuff was new and hadn't really made a run yet in the car up this year.
This episode of the MitsuTimes podcast is brought to you by Chancla Performance, the home of all custom fabrication for any performance vehicle specializing in the 5th Gen Mirage. They can do everything from daily sleepers all the way to full-blown race cars. Contact them on all their social medias or visit chanclaperformance.com. That's CHANCLA performance.com. So, Tony, when you're doing a drag and drive event with the DSM, do you feel like you can get complacent and comfortable with the car? Like, I'm sure people who just have naturally aspirated V8s, maybe they can just coast the whole time. Are you constantly like, oh man, what does this sound? What does this smell? Is it broken?
You hit the nail on the head. So this last one was my third time doing a drag and drive in my Eclipse, and I'll say I'm much more comfortable with it now. And actually, I think the hood exit exhaust maybe helps some too, because it drowns everything else out.
Right.
But the first two times, I mean, every smell, every sound, everything, you're like in a panic, like what's going on with the car? Exactly like you just said, and the car's got tubular subframes and spherical bearings everywhere. So like a little grain of sand or dirt, whatever, hitting those makes them creak and stuff different than they did before. So the car makes tons of noises that you're not super comfortable with. But I've gotten, like, last year at Sick Week, we pulled into Don Garlett's museum in Ocala, Florida, and the front of my car just sounded awful. Like there was something creaking in it, and we're like freaking out about it. Like, what is this? We jacked the car up. We're going through stuff. Can't find anything. And then this year, we're leaving Bradenton, and the car makes the same exact noises, and we're just like, oh, well, that's the noise the car makes in Florida, apparently.
That's just normal now.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it's like when we got to like a place where it's sandy and windy, I think all that grit gets in all of the bearings and stuff in the front end, the spherical bearings, and I think it starts making all these creaking noises that don't sound good, but what are you going to do about it, right? So you just keep going. So this past year, there was a lot less stress of like, oh, what's that noise type of stuff, but it's definitely always in the back of your mind. I mean, most people wouldn't imagine driving a 900 horsepower DSM 800 miles over the course of a week while racing it.
I hate driving mine from the trailer to the staging lane sometimes.
That's the cool thing about having the car set up for drag and drive stuff. Like, it doesn't overheat. So like, if there's delays and stuff on the racetrack, I can just leave it running. The alternator charges, all the fans kick in automatically. Like it's pretty awesome to like not have to worry about like your car getting hot, your battery dying, any of that stuff.
That's a whole different world of DSMs right there.
Yeah, for sure. So,
Tony, what's next for the car? Are you going to do some more events this year? Is there going to be a total rebuild again before the next Sick Week?
So I'm undecided if I'm going to do any more drag and drives with the car, at least in the near term. The events are just brutal. Like, I'm gone for 7 or 8 days when you have travel there, tech day, 5 days at the event, all the hotels and food and gas and all that stuff. It's a lot to do. So I'm not sure how many more drag and drives I'm going to do or which ones. I say that now, and then I'll probably sign up for one tomorrow. But the cool thing is, while I was making all the changes to the car for this year, ATCO released an event under Chris Miller Racing.
Yeah.
And it has a class that basically my car is now built perfectly for. Like the weight of the car is almost dead on the minimum weight. My turbo size falls perfectly in it. I can actually go to a better fuel. So I think there's an event on April 1st and April 2nd at ATCO. It's the first one with this new class. I'm going to show up and see how it is. I have no idea how fast the class is ultimately going to be. I suspect it's going to be closing in on sevens, but if I can hold my own with the car the way it is, I'm actually just going to race it and enjoy it some this year.
Heck yeah.
And if I'm completely outclassed, maybe I'll put a filled block in it and turn the boost up some and see what it'll do. I don't know.
Heck yeah.
We'll have to see how the events go. See how close I am, if I'm in the ballpark or not.
It sounds like a lot of local DSM guys are pretty happy about the new Chris Miller tournament style racing.
Yeah, so I know like Rich Ong is local. He'll be going to them, and I'm sure Mike Wohler will probably be going to them. Alex Pisidlo, I think that's how you say his last name.
Yeah,
he'll probably be going to some of them. Jeff Mueller with the Evo,
yep.
I'm guessing will probably be going. Yeah, we've got quite the DSM crew up in this area right now.
For sure.
And I think we're going to show up in big numbers.
Heck yeah. Love to hear that.
Yeah.
So is there any events outside of that Chris Miller racing that you foresee bringing the car to this year?
There's also an IFO race at Cecil County, Maryland. That's actually in like 2 weeks, I think, that I'll be going to. I'll have to beat Rich Ong at that if he gets his car ready. I won that race last year, and then I won the last IFO race that was at ACO too.
Oh, heck yeah.
So I've got some work to do though now to keep that streak alive. So there's that, and then I've been debating on the shootout, but I've also got Rich that I help a lot and Aaron that I help a lot that are probably both taking their cars. So it's a question of, what do I prioritize, helping those guys out or bringing my car out?
Right.
Because realistically, I wouldn't be as much help as they probably need if I bring my own car. So I want to see both of those guys do awesome too. So I might not bring a car out to the shootout. I might just be there helping again.
Love to see Aaron come back. That would be great.
Yeah, I think he's at least thinking about it.
That's good. So, Tony, are there any other projects that you're working on?
Yes, stupid me has a third race car now.
Oh.
I just bought actually not just, it's been a couple of years, and I bought a Mustang for radial tire racing. So
nice.
It's going to have a turbocharged Coyote in it with a Haltech Nexus and a bunch of other cool goodies. So I just want to, I've never dealt with a radial tire before. I've never dealt with like as much suspension tuning as these cars need, and I never had a turbo V8 either. So I'm just looking forward to something different.
Right.
And actually, to be honest with you, if the Chris Miller series was announced 2 years ago before I bought this Mustang, I maybe wouldn't have bought it. But, before this Chris Miller series, there wasn't really a great place to race my Eclipse other than drag and drives. And they're not, like I said, they're pretty brutal. Like you can maybe do one a year.
Yeah.
So I bought the Mustang so that I could have a regular place to go racing. Cecil County, which is a little over an hour from me, has, they call it a streetcar shootout, but none of the cars are street cars. It's basically like a radial tire racing event once a month all summer long. So I bought the Mustang so I can go race there with my family and all. And I'm still looking forward to doing that. But again, if the Chris Miller series was announced 2 years ago, I maybe wouldn't have, because I'd have a place to go race the Eclipse regularly.
Yeah, that's fair. I definitely think it's cool to get into something new though. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what I can learn with this. And I feel like the Coyote is like a natural step because it's dual overhead cam. The heads actually almost look like they could have been off of 4G.
Oh wow.
So it's what I know. It's just double the cylinders,
right?
More displacement, and then I get to. Hopefully the motor should be, knock on wood, should be pretty reliable in something like that. And it's really like learning how to tune for the track and all that. So it's a new adventure I'm looking forward to, a new challenge.
Heck yeah. Well, Tony, at the end, I always give people a chance to give a shout out or a thanks to anybody who's helped them along the way, help get their car, or in your case, cars together. Is there anybody that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, sure. Obviously my wife's been a huge help and supporter in letting me do this and letting me spend all this money on all these cars. My dad is always a huge help. And then, like I said, the dragster is technically my dad's, and he's driven it and he works on it all the time. And he's the one that got me into racing. I really couldn't do this without him. And I don't know if I would have been interested in it without him. Yeah. So he's influenced that in my whole life. There's some companies that have been with me for a really long time. Extreme PSI. I met those guys, New, Ha, and Hung. I think back in 2003 or 2004 when I first got my GSX, and they've kind of supported me ever since then. And they've been awesome. They're local to me here. I can't thank those guys enough. They're phenomenal. I hope everybody still patronizes their business.
For sure.
Fuel Injector Clinic and all the guys there, they're phenomenal. Tim, Jens, Randy, and then all the guys in the shop, they're always awesome. Their injectors are flawless. I could tell countless stories of how their injector data has saved my butt or made tuning so much easier or something, and it's awesome to have a good company like that. Haltech, I have a Haltech in all three of my cars now, so they're phenomenal. They make great products. I wouldn't want to tune anything else. Kigley Racing, Kevin's awesome. He's a source of great knowledge.
Yeah.
there's Aaron Gregory Racing now. He just started, so check out his website. He built my trans. He helps out with some of the tuning and stuff in the 2G. He's been my co-pilot. And like I said, I help him out at the track too. And then there's just, I couldn't even name all the other people that have helped me out throughout the years, or, that are great people involved in this. This is a great community. I've been really fortunate to be a part of it for so long.
Heck yeah. Well, Tony, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I know we've been trying to do this for a while, and then you reached out and was like, hey, let's do it after a sick week. I thought, man, that's going to be so perfect. I'm glad that you've been so successful with that, and thanks again for coming on and telling your story. I hope that we can get some people interested in these events and maybe see some more DSMs out there doing this.
Well, thanks for having me, Josh, and thanks for being patient with me. I was a little nervous saying after sick week because I didn't know how it would go. But it couldn't have gone any better. So.
Yeah, for sure. Big congrats on the what do you guys call it? Category wins or class win?
Yeah, it was a class win. Yeah. I won Street Week Freaks, which is basically anything but a V8. So it's 4-cylinders, 6-cylinders, diesels, including V8 diesels, and rotaries and electric cars. And there were, I think, like 17 or so cars in that class this year. So I won that class. I also won quickest 4-cylinder, which I guess you would call a category, which obviously if you win Sick Week Freaks, you also win quickest 4-cylinder. And then my average time, which I think was 8:76 or 8:75, that retook the record of the quickest 4-cylinder ever in a Dragon Drive. I took that from Scott Glassbrook. He set it at 8:79 last year.
46.3's duking it out at the top there.
Yep, for sure.
Awesome, man. Love that. Big congrats. Every time I get to see you working in action, I always like, man, your attention to detail is crazy. So it doesn't surprise me that you've been so successful with this.
I appreciate that.
All right, Tony. Well, thanks again, and I hope to see you soon.
Great. Thanks for having me, Josh.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for listening to the MitsuTimes podcast. Check out our Instagram and Facebook for daily updates. Get added to our list by going to MitsuTimes.org and clicking Submit a Slip. Thank you to all of our sponsors.